You're listening to From Fear to Love. I'm your host, Alma Lee. When I was about, I guess maybe 15 years old, I had this, I had a journal. I actually still have it. It's missing several pages because when I was about 15, I think it was, I had started to actively journal or, write in my diary. And if you've been listening to this podcast or if you've been following any of my social media or reading my books, you know that I talk frequently about my experiences with abuse, childhood abuse. Most of the abuse that I experienced was emotional. It was tyranny in that my spirit was consistently under attack. That was something that I had discovered in my own therapy, was that I was under attack, not only physically, but emotionally. And one of the reasons, and I can remember wanting to write in my diary, was just because I was feeling, discombobulated. I was feeling some type of way that I couldn't understand, as most children of abuse do, or heck, most children, period. It's a confusing time growing up, going through all of those processes and learning who you are, learning your own mindset. And then when you're under, constant attack, you're in a state of survivability. So part of my survivability was writing into my diary. And so my diary was used against me in part of that, where the most intimate thoughts that I thought were safe and protected, I had put down in my book, and came home from school one day and had realized that my father had taken my diary and had read it. And I mean, I learned from it, obviously. It's definitely colored who I am today in understanding the depth by which people will stoop to manipulate other people. And in this situation, it was my father. And I was deeply wounded, not only by this infraction, but then I also realized from the lesson that I can't take my thoughts and feelings and put them and write them down anywhere, or someone's going to use them against me. That was the lesson that I learned in that experience. And it still resonates with me today, because when I think about it, actually, I still have the actual journal. It's in my storage. And when I had realized that my father had violated my privacy, I ripped out many of the pages. So the book itself still exists, but the first third of the diary is missing. And you can see in the spine where I ripped the pages out because I felt so violated. So what am I talking about today? I'm talking about journaling. And I share that piece of my history with you because I think there's probably a lot of people who feel the way I do when it comes to sharing your most intimate thoughts. When you write something down, and how, putting that reality, putting that part of yourself into the atmosphere and in written form can be incredibly vulnerable. I know it was for me, and for many years afterward, I wouldn't even hardly write letters to people because I was so fearful that my words would be used against me, as my father had attempted to do. I can look back now and realize that, when people are sick, as my father was, and this applies to anybody, I'm just using this as an example for you to understand that it's important to not lean so much into the vitriol, the bitterness of being violated in that way. It's just understanding why people behave the way they do. Because if you're like me, who struggle with journaling or writing anything down in a diary or being vulnerable at all, you have to understand why that is. And for me, for many years, I didn't know why I had such a horrible, terrible, difficult time being vulnerable in any relationship, friendships, romantic, any relationship. Even with my children, it was difficult for me to be vulnerable because there was always this thing that had been programmed within me to be very wary of my thoughts and feelings and don't give anybody any evidence. It was probably about 2003, maybe 2004, perhaps. I had been seeing this man, and I was really taken by him. And he was really sweet and nice. And I mean, I remember the experience, but I don't remember his name. But I had attempted to write a poem, and this was the big. Well, I had been in therapy prior to this when I was in the military, but this was the second round of therapy, and I had attempted to write a poem, not to give to him or anything, but just as a way to express my emotions. And man, I can sit here and I can tell you now that writing that down, putting that on a piece of paper, I felt so much shame attached. I felt that if I were to allow anyone to see my poem, that they would use it and that I would be made fun of, I would be laughed at. And I folded it, I put it in my drawer, and then I would go check on it to make sure it was still there because I had been traumatized from that experience with my diary. So, is this you? Do you struggle with something similar to my experience where you feel some type of way about putting your feelings, your genuine, vulnerable, most intimate thoughts and feelings down on paper? If you struggle with journaling, why is that? Are you fearful that somebody will manipulate you and use your words against you? I mean, I know now why I did what I did and why I felt the way that I felt. And it still resonates with me today. I have lyrics to songs that have popped into my head, and I'll grab my phone, especially if I'm out and about, and I don't have my journal handy. I'll just pull my phone out with a little note app, and I'll put some words down in there. And I've got like lyrics from songs and poems and things that I've put down in there. And sometimes I'll go back and I'll look at something I'd written before, and I still struggle with that. But here's the thing. Here's the lesson in that. Because if I don't have the depth of understanding as someone who, professes to be a professional in helping people do better and evolve, if I don't have that empathy, if I don't have that compassion, how good of a job am I going to do for you? So that's why I shared this with you, is that I get it. Journaling is hard work. Journaling is really difficult. So a buddy of mine from basic training had reached out to me a couple days ago and said, I think if you were to do an episode on journaling, I think that would be very helpful for people. I was like, that's a great freaking idea. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Thank you for the inspiration for putting this out there, because I knew exactly that I wanted to talk about my diary. I knew that I cannot possibly be the only person who has experienced this level of violation of privacy to the point where your hesitance in connection and hesitance in being vulnerable to your own thoughts and feelings, because they have been manipulated, because they have been thrown back in your face and you've been made fun of, or the words that you use were used against you. But here's the thing. You can achieve so much understanding about yourself when you journal. You can. And here's why. There is something now. I'm a social worker. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a social worker. So the extent of my understanding is tied directly into my education of theory. And here's the theory in regards to writing your thoughts down. Writing your thoughts down on paper, there is something about being inauthentic with yourself. It's almost like we can't lie. It's almost like when you pick up a pen and you get a journal and you go to write down what you're thinking and feeling, and the purpose is to get those thoughts outside of your head and heart and put it on paper. A lot of people tell me, a lot of clients and friends too say, well, Alma, I can't do it. I struggle with it. I get writer's block. And I push back and I say, well, I don't think really writer's block is what it is, because writer's block is when your creativity is sort of at a stalemate. Journaling is you are writing down your feelings. And when you're struggling with putting your feelings to paper, That is something more in alignment with your throat chakra and with your need for survivability. And you know something? Here's what I say to that. Journaling is critical. Journaling is tantamount to identifying the things within you that need to be addressed. When you take a pen and you take a journal and you have the ability to just put anything down, you're going to develop an understanding about what your priorities are, where your head's at, where is your investment, your emotional investment. You have this sort of understanding about yourself and how you move through the world when you journal. And these are things that we don't think about day to day. These are not the things that sort of roll around in our brain. Most of us are on a type of schedule, a muscle memory, knee-jerk response on how we do everything throughout our life, throughout our day-to-day activities. Actually requires very little critical thought. Journaling requires critical thought, which pulls you into the moment where you have to articulate what you're feeling and thinking and how that's affecting your actions. And if you don't take the time to articulate your thoughts and feelings, well, your actions will simply be a measurement of your normal day-to-day routine. And isn't that what we're trying to do here? Aren't we trying to move through life differently in better ways where we can achieve our purpose, and not only achieve our purpose, but achieve greatness? There is nothing in the world that I want more for you, the listener, than for you to be able to identify that very thing that lies within your soul that will give you the level of joy that you deserve. That's your birthright. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it until I'm blue in the face. Joy is your birthright. But you got to do the thing that makes you uncomfortable in order to attain that greatness. And part of that is journaling. Part of that is putting down your real, genuine, heartfelt thoughts and feelings, writing it down, looking at it, putting it into the universe in front of you on a piece of paper and saying, this is how I'm going to manifest my existence. This is how I am going to achieve the very thing that I was put on earth to do. That's what I'm doing. I am no different than you. By my experiences as a child, I even had the understanding even back then that there was something about me that needed to move differently as a means of serving others. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea for probably another 30 years, really identifying and being able to sort of get that into the crosshairs of my movement in my life on what it was that I needed to achieve in my purpose and in my direction to achieve my greatness. And that is to motivate you. And that is to encourage you to move differently. And so the very thing that makes us uncomfortable in life, the very issues, we have to figure out and target what those issues are, because we all have them. We all have roadblocks and speed bumps in our lives that if you do not slow down and pay attention to, you're never going to understand, process, fix, and grow from if you don't find out what they are. And journaling is a pathway to achieving that. And then, of course, if you're struggling with putting things down on paper, you've got to figure out why that is. You've got to understand why that is. Hell, even if you just sit down with a pen or in front of your computer, however that looks, however, you want to, potentially achieve that, and you're still stuck, what is that? What is that feeling that you're having? And go from there. Start simple. You don't have to pour your whole heart out and write down the very intimate, painful things that you've experienced right out of the gate. Pick up a journal, get that pen, get that computer open, sit there and say, my coffee was really good this morning. It can be that simple. It can be so simple, and it can, appear to have very little gravity or meaning. But you're starting from somewhere. You got to start with some baby steps. You got to, try it on and see how, it feels to put something out there. This isn't so bad. My coffee really was good this morning. I'm still drinking my coffee this morning. And move from there. Today I'm going to A, B, C, and D. Today, I want to achieve A, B, C, and D. This is how I feel about myself. And you know what? Be honest. Be honest. Are you somebody who is consistent only in deprecating yourself because that is the only way that you have learned to move through this life in motivation of self? Are you one of those people that uses self-deprecation as your model for achieving your greatness? And here's the thing about that. A journal is going to hold you accountable. And I think that's what a lot of people fear too, is when you are honest, when you are genuine with yourself about how you're thinking and feeling, you can't avoid your own toxic behaviors. They're right there in black and white. And then you have to identify what you need to change and move out of. So it is critical. And it's baby steps. It's baby steps. I've got several journals. I've got all kinds of journals. I share with you what I've written in my journal many times as a point of inspiration and motivation to, use myself as an example to set you up so that you don't feel so isolated in moving through life. Because I've reached a point now where I realize that's what I have to do in order to achieve my purpose. Because I know now through journaling and through this experience and through therapy that I have to model my behavior for the people that I serve. So that's why, I think back on, those years ago when I was a little kid and the thing that I journaled about, and I actually, my father, rest in peace. And I hope he is resting in peace. He was not well. He was not mentally well. And on top of that, he was a drug addict. And so everything that he did in his life was moving into a space of protection of himself. So he didn't have any respect. He didn't have any comprehension of respect. Narcissists don't respect other people. They certainly don't respect their children, nor do they respect their children's privacy. And for that experience, I had written in my journal a lot of things about my father. Man, I tore him up too. I wrote some really awful things in there. So he read that. And then, of course, I got in trouble for expression of my feelings. There was no empathy to be had there. I don't remember the outcome of it, but the lesson that I remember taking away from it was tear up your diary, tear it up, rip those pages out, and don't ever write anything ever again that someone can use against you. And I didn't. For many, many, many years after that, I did not. That was the lesson learned. Did you experience something like that? Why do you not journal? And if you do journal, what are you journaling about? Are you getting real and raw and vulnerable with how you're expressing yourself? The more vulnerable you are with yourself in your journaling, the greater the ability to attain your purpose, because you're clearing out your vision. We are cloudy in our vision until we process the crap that we're working through, because we all have shit that we have to process and work through. All of us, every one of us has something that we carry through our life. And the more crap that we don't process, it blurs our purpose. It blurs our vision. We don't have the ability to move forward and achieve our greatness until we process all that old shit. That's why you got to journal. It's like you can't drive with mud on your windshield. You can't move forward in life if you don't clear that shit up. So journaling is just one way of achieving clarity so that you can move forward. And I'm not saying that, once you move forward that you got to forget the whole past, but I am saying you won't have to live there anymore. And a lot of people do because they lean into the past as a means of protection from the future. Well, if this happened before, it'll happen again, so I need to pay attention to that, and I need to hold on to it. I've done it, and that's why I recognize it. You've got to understand yourself. You've got to understand what's important to you. You've got to understand what's important to you and your priorities without the noise. The noise are the people that are in your close circle that expect you to behave and move in a certain way in alignment with their priorities, with their involvement. I feel this way and you're my best friend, so you need to feel the same way I do, kind of thing. You have to find your own clarity. You have to find your own purpose. And the side note to that is that sometimes those relationships with those people that have certain expectations from you, and once you do find your clarity, those relationships may not last. They may not. They may go away. These people may find that you become insufferable when you start thinking for yourself, or you think in a way that is incongruent and it's not in alignment with their philosophies and their priorities. Hey, I'm just here to tell you it's okay. It's okay, because once you find that clarity, once you start realizing who you are, and once you start realizing what your purpose is, even if you start losing those relationships, that is a good thing, because when you're in alignment with what you need to be doing, the people who are in alignment with you will start to come into that space as well. It's the clarity. And to achieve that clarity, you got to understand yourself. You got to process your own crap. Journaling is a great way to do that. So get your journal out. You don't have to write anything big. Just do it as an exercise. What color is the sky? I mean, start simple. I have a gray car. I like my dog. It can be very simple, just as a matter of getting comfortable with the process. Baby steps, but you got to do it. And you got to figure out who you are, what your priorities are, where you want to go. Because I promise you, there is greatness inside you. That is no bullshit. You have it in you. You just got to clean up some stuff first in order to get there. Pick out your journal. Write it down. Make it a practice. You deserve it. Pay attention to it. Find your clarity. Move forward. Find your greatness. And find joy. That's your birthright. All right, guys. From fear to love. This has been an LBM production. Please like, subscribe, and share this show. Thanks for listening.